In 1991, I was 9 years old. My main goal was to get a Super Nintendo because that system launched that very year, and my main goal in life was to get my hands on one of them babies. At the time, my main console was a Nintendo, and my favorite game at that time was Double Dragon 3. I love beat 'em up games, so that was right up my alley. That same year, I went to visit my cousin Dante, who lived in Carson, and he had a video store, and in those days going to the video store was a big deal. At the video store they had not only movies, but they had some arcade games, and I noticed there's one game in particular that all the kids were all huddled up and just playing like crazy. There was like so many people. I actually think there was more people there to play this video game than there was to actually rent movies. And what game was that? This Street Fighter game. I'd never even heard of it before. And my cousin actually was really good at it. You see, back in those days, the best video games weren't played at home like it is now. The best games were played at the arcade. The arcade was where you wanted to be. And little did I know that that game was about to become an obsession and my most favorite video game ever. So Street Fighter 2 came out in 1991. It was the successor to Street Fighter that came out in 1987. I'd never even heard of the first game, so my experience with Street Fighter started with Street Fighter 2. And the game was awesome because at that point in time I never really realized there was no other game like it as far as a game where you fight other people. Now I know that's a bit not true because I do remember there is a game called Pit Fighter, and if I remember right, Pit Fighter also was a fighting game, but it just didn't do that well and it wasn't that popular. And Street Fighter kind of blew the lid off of those types of games. The first player I ever picked was Blanca, and my cousin picked Ken. And of course, he beat me the first match. I had no idea what I was doing, just pushing buttons. Of course, my cousin didn't give me any kind of instructions on what to do. But I remember that was my first introduction to Street Fighter. And it sucks because back then there was a long line of people waiting to play. Like, people would put their quarters up on the machine and say, "I got next." So like there was a line of quarters, which made it even more intense because you wanted to make your match count and do really well, because you knew if you lost you're gonna have to wait like another 10 minutes or something before you get your chance to play. And I was basically hooked from then on. This game kind of became like a drug for me. I was looking for Street Fighter everywhere. Like, can I go to arcade? Mom, can I go to arcade? Can we stop here? Is there a 7-Eleven? Because back in those days 7-Elevens had fighting games too. So I would be looking for 7-Eleven. I found out the 7-Eleven by my house had it. So I like my parents, like, "Hey, when are we going to the grocery store? Can you drop me off at 7-Eleven? I'll stay at 7-Eleven while you go grocery shopping and come pick me up later and just give me $2 so I could play." And that was like my life revolved around playing this video game at any chance I got. And it was pretty cool. It had a pretty good amount of players from around the world to choose from. You had Blanca, Ken, Ryu, E Honda, Guile, Chun-Li, Dawson, and Zangief. My most favorite player was Ryu. I was a Ryu guy all the way. I still am. But as time has gone on, I've started using a lot of Chun-Li and Guile. And I remember I had a friend who actually showed me, because we used to make fun of Zangief, he showed me that Zangief is basically the best Street Fighter of them all if you learn how to do that pile drive, that 360 pile drive. And that thing is deadly because it takes off so much power. So Zangief is actually one of the best players that I've learned, and I always try to get good with him because my boy showed me that, hey, this guy, you don't sleep on Zangief, bro. Like, he's super overpowered if you know how to use him. So at this point in time, we all obviously know that Street Fighter is one of the most popular video games ever, especially if you're around my age and you lived to see how popular this game was. We all know this game was everywhere, and we all remember how we couldn't wait for Super Nintendo to come out with its version of it so we could play it at home and stop having to try to get rides to the arcade to play it, and just play it in the comfort of our house. So I've been reading up on just a little background info and doing a little research about Street Fighter, And some things have come up that I didn't really think about, but basically at this point in time, all video games were point based. Like, you played games to rack up the most points and put your name on there so the next person that played could see, like, oh man, I gotta beat, JJL's, record so I can be the top. And that was kind of like the main motivation for people that played video games back then. But what Street Fighter did is they got rid of that, and the goal was just to literally beat the person you're playing against, another human being, and beat them. Of course, you could play against a computer too, but at least for me, it was way more fun to actually play against your friends and try to see if you can whoop their ass for bragging rights. So there was no other games really like that before that time. I never really thought about that, but that little change kind of revolutionized a new way to play video games and ushered in a new era of fighting games. The next probably 2 years later, which seemed like such a long time, after Street Fighter, I saw something else I had never seen before, a game that came in with so much power and energy, and we know this game as Mortal Kombat, and the buzz revolving that game was kind of like next level, but I'll save that for another video. Let's go back to Street Fighter. So, doing some research, it says that Street Fighter 2 became the best-selling game since the golden age of arcade video games. By 1994, it had been played by at least 25 million people in the United States alone. Due to its major success, a series of updated versions had additional features and more characters. Worldwide, more than 200,000 arcade cabinets and 15 million software units of all versions of Street Fighter 2 had been sold, grossing an estimated $10 billion in total revenue. Wow, Capcom. Can I have some money? Anyways, making it one of the top 3 highest grossing video games of all time as of 2017, and the best selling fighting game unit until 2019. More than 6.3 million SNES cartridges of Street Fighter 2 had been sold, making Capcom's best-selling single software game for the next 2 decades. 2 decades, that's a long time. Its best-selling game of a single platform and the highest-selling third-party game of the SNES. So that I'm not surprised, because like I said, Street Fighter was everywhere. It definitely is one of my top 5 most favorite video games ever. I literally would fall asleep, or at least lay in bed, and just be thinking of, like, man, how did I lose? How did I lose to that guy? What could I have done different? I gotta do this or get better at that, or learn how to do the Dragon Punch whenever I want, and just all kinds of stuff. I was very competitive, and obviously they've come out with other versions of Street Fighter as the years went on, and milked the crap out of Street Fighter, and rightfully so. I mean, they made $10 billion. I don't blame them. So that's kind of my story about Street Fighter 2, and I know tons of people have to have similar stories and still love this game. If I was to say what Street Fighter is my absolute favorite, I would have to go with Street Fighter 3 actually. But anyways, I hope you guys liked the video. If you have some stories too, or have some favorite character, I would love to talk about them. And maybe even, like, some of you guys have Steam, get some matches going. So I'll catch you guys on the flip side, and thanks for watching. Peace out.